Welcome, everyone. We are so excited and honored to have Dr. Miles with us this evening. We'll be starting in just a moment. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being with us this evening for this wonderful presentation by Dr. Katie Pace Miles. Let me tell you a little bit about the presentation this evening, and then my colleague, Kirsten DeRoche, will share Dr. Miles' bio. Tonight, Dr. Miles will explain how she overhauled the fieldwork requirement of the early literacy graduate and undergraduate courses that she teaches and or oversees in the fall of 2020 in order to improve pre-service teacher training and foundational skills of striving first and second graders from historically underserved schools and the New York City Department of Education. Dr. Miles will explain the research and evidence-based early intervention programs and the implementation approach CUNY Reading Corps has used to scale this initiative to 650 pre-service teachers and over 1,200 students served last year, and even more ambitious goals set for this academic year. And now it is my honor. My name is Dr. Pam Kastner to have Kirsten DeRoche share Dr. Miles' bio.
Hi, everyone. Catherine Pace Miles, PhD, is an associate professor at Brooklyn College, City University of New York, or CUNY. Dr. Miles's research interests include orthographic mapping, high-frequency word learning, reading interventions, and literacy instruction that is both developmentally appropriate and grounded in the science of reading. Dr. Miles is the academic advisor for Reading Rescue, an evidence-based intervention for first and second grade students. She's the author of Reading Ready, an explicit and systematic word reading curriculum for kindergarten and first grade students. Dr. Miles is also the co-founder and principal investigator of CUNY Reading Corps, which improves pre-service teacher training and provides free high-dosage tutoring to historically underserved New York City students. Will you all please join me in welcoming Dr. Miles?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kastner. Thank you for having me. Kirsten, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be back at Patton. I was here maybe a year ago talking about Reading Ready, and here I am talking to you all, and I just can't believe so many people are here on an evening, 7 o'clock on a Monday. So I really appreciate the time you're taking, and it's obvious that you must also be passionate about everything, every stone that we can turn over to try and improve pre-service training. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about what I did with my field work. Maybe you're a professor and who's here and interested in that. Maybe you are from the schools, you're an administrator, teacher, learning specialist, and you want to think about how you might be partnering and maybe asking more of your higher ed partners, or maybe you're an advocate, and we're just so happy to have all of you here. There's something really big that can happen when you critically evaluate what you're doing with your field work. So it was a very nice introduction. I'm there, Katie Pace Miles. I want to acknowledge two of my colleagues. Andrew Fletcher is the Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships at the New York City Department of Education. He was my collaborator on this project in the midst of COVID. I'll talk a little bit about his role in all of this. And Dr. Erin Croak is the Director of Literacy Initiatives at CUNY Central, and she helps run the day-to-day of the operations now because we've become so big. And you'll see the pictures on the left-hand side. On the top, you'll see one of our CUNY tutors smiling really big on the screen. That's Jessica, and there's her student. They're doing a remote tutoring session. You'll see some of the activities we do in both Reading Rescue and Reading Ready in the middle. And at the bottom, you see an in-person tutoring session with Reading Ready. And that's one of our CUNY tutors, Sally. So here we go. Okay, so I'd like to start. We're going to talk big numbers tonight about what was able to scale across CUNY. But I just want to say to you, we're going to adapt a little bit of old New York City wisdom that if I can do this there, you can do this anywhere. And I really mean this. You should not be swayed or dismayed or decide that, oh, they did it in New York, it was so big, and what, I could never do that there. I'm talking to universities all over the country And I'm so encouraged because professors are saying, oh, I have 15 students in my course in the spring. Why don't I try this? And that's exactly the mentality to go into a project like this. And that's how I started. I just had the courses that I was teaching and overseeing. I got started and then it took off. It doesn't need to, maybe it will take off, but you shouldn't feel that pressure. Just think about what you can do, what you have control over to improve pre-service training. So a little about me and a little bit about Erin, who helps run the day-to-day of this operation. So as Kirsten said, I'm a professor of education at Brooklyn College, but I started as I'm a very proud teacher. I'm a teacher at heart. I'm a teacher to this day. I'll be a teacher my whole life. I taught kindergarten and third grade. I was also trained in second grade, and I was a reading interventionist in grades 3 through 5. That reading interventionist role that I had, I swear it was the best job I ever had. And that has carried me into what I do today. I'm back into my interventionist roots with the work I'm doing. I went off and did my PhD in ed psychology and was trained as a buzzy reading scientist. My mentor was Dr. Linnea Airy. Many of you know her theories of orthographic mapping and phase theory. And from there, I became a professor of education in the CUNY system, which I'll talk about in just a second. So here's Brooklyn College. Here's my grad students this semester. I opened a new course this semester on structured literacy. I have to give a shout out to AIM Pathways. I've partnered with Pat and Nancy. They're helping while all of these students you see here are tutoring. And I'm running this larger initiative with tutoring. I'm able to tap into AIM Pathways to make my course as awesome as it possibly can be. So maybe that's a talk for another time, but I wanted to give AIM a shout out. I'm also a proud New York City public school mom. My oldest child, Georgie, is in first grade. Henry's soon to come up into the New York City system. And in the midst of COVID, as you'll hear, I was teaching Georgie how to read. And so that really stuck with me, the privilege that I had to teach my child how to read, the skills that I had, the materials I had. And I was really pained by the fact that all over New York, schools were shuttered and parents without the means to teach their children how to read. These children were then missing this window of opportunity. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. So Erin is my partner here. She's been a CUNY administrator for 15 years. She's focused on really incredible projects on workforce development and system-wide programs and policy initiatives. She's a mom of 3. Shout out to the Phillies. Erin actually lives in Philadelphia, but she works for CUNY, which is so great. And little interesting tidbit is that Erin used Reading Ready with her own child, Henry, when he was in kindergarten. So lots of good synergy going on. I think that's how you get things to work in the scale that we've been able to do. So I know I'm talking to a Pennsylvania group. You may or may not be familiar with the CUNY system. So CUNY stands for the City University of New York, and it is not one university. It is actually 25 colleges. 15 of the colleges have education programs. It's massive. It's kind of like your Penn State, right? Or another system that you have like that. There are approximately 17,000 students enrolled just in the education programs. That was of 2021. It's a ton of education students. 68% are persons of color. It's incredible the diversity we have at CUNY. I believe we're commonly often voted the most diverse university system in the country. 39% of the teacher education graduates of color in New York State come from CUNY. So that you take the CUNY schools of ed and you spread them all across the state. And that's really quite remarkable. So just to acclimate you to this graph, you can look over all the way to the right to 2021, and you'll see you want to look at the green, red, and yellow bars, all persons of color. I want to acknowledge that even the blue bar that is white, non-Hispanic, many of our students are immigrants from English-speaking countries. Many of our students are immigrants from countries that are where the students will often check the white box, but then they also want to make sure that we know that there are immigrants who are non-native English speakers. They come to us from Russia and Ukraine and Poland, and I could go on. So incredible diversity there. Tonight, I want you to think about these 3 key levers that could possibly make tutoring in the university system scale, or even maybe just get off the ground for you. The first, you can do this with a passionate literacy faculty member. That's me over at CUNY. The second is, what partnerships do you have to leverage? In the midst of COVID, that's simply what I did. I just took my network and figured out how to bake them in a different type of souffle, and then go forward with this type of initiative. And finally, you'll need a program, you'll need training and support. But when you think about your partnerships, I bet the program will come to you. You'll figure out what's available to you. So a bit of background info. Prior to COVID, reading support in the New York City Department of Education was similar to many other parts of the country. More than half of our students, unfortunately, were not proficient readers. I know there are parts of this country where the non-proficiency rates are even worse than this. I am originally from Buffalo, New York, and the proficiency rates, I recently looked at those, are 24% of students are reading proficiently. I highly encourage you to look at your city and see what the proficiency rates are, and maybe that's some added information that you can bring to the stakeholders who may or may not approve of you doing some type of tutoring. It is without a doubt that we need this. That is because in the midst of this proficient, not proficient NAEP scores, we have an abundance of private tutoring going on. So even students who would have been or are in the not proficient category, their families, as we all know, because I'm sure most of you on this call are educators, we know that if they are a family of means, they will likely find a tutor for that child. And so private tutoring abounds. It's gone on, for since probably the dawn of education, there's been some sort of private tutoring for children who need it, whose families can pay. That private tutoring, I think, was exposed more, particularly in New York City in the midst of the pandemic, because it turned not from just private tutoring, it turned into pod teaching. And I'm not sure if they had this in your area, but in New York, there was like a year of school where there was barely any school. This is after the school shut down. And then families of means were able to create small pods and hire a private teacher just to teach that small pod of children. And so in New York, it became more exposed. And now in our classrooms, post-pandemic or post-pandemic-ish, we have even more variability in skills in a first or second grade classroom. I want to make sure you know I'm not disparaging anything regarding private tutoring. If my child needed a private tutor, of course. I myself was a private tutor back in the day. That's why I'm so aware of it. This is at the beginning of my career as an educator. Many of you may be tutors. I don't disparage it one bit. I just am an advocate that all children needed some form of tutoring if they are a striving reader. So here, I just want to make sure that whenever I'm talking to an audience, you have a sense of New York City. So you'll see the 5 boroughs. Starting at the top, you have the Bronx, and then underneath Manhattan, you've got Staten Island, Brooklyn with the pin, that's where Brooklyn College is. I also live in Brooklyn, and then you have Queens. So as many of you know, there are several areas in New York City that are low-income communities. And these low-income communities often have schools that are not performing that well on their ELA proficiency scores. And this is where you're seeing the overlay of blue and purple. And Brooklyn College is right at an epicenter there of overlapping blue and purple, where the schools surrounding the area are very low performing. So it has always been on my radar. It's also my mission to support schools who need our university students the most. As you saw on the news, the areas that were hardest hit by COVID were often low-income communities that had very high density. And that's how COVID was spreading so quickly. And so these communities were at the forefront of my mind as everything was shuttered. And again, I live in Brooklyn. I just could not get over the fact that these were children who were at schools who were already low-performing schools on ELA proficiency and math. These were families who were already struggling financially, many of them, and then we add this layer of COVID on top. And so this was just a trifecta of issues. And these children needed so much more support than we were able to give them in New York and in many other parts of the country. So that's when COVID hit. I wound up, of course, as a university professor, you shut down your university courses or you transitioned it all online. You essentially survived the spring of 2020 with whatever it took to get through the university course. And then you came back to school in the fall, thinking to yourself, okay, we might be in some state of new normal for a little bit here. And we have to figure this out. It's not okay for us just to scramble like we did at the end of spring 2020. So in the fall of 2020, there were 30 hours of fieldwork that I was in charge of for the courses that I teach and oversee at Brooklyn College. There's an undergraduate course that has 2 sections. It's on the development and teaching of literacy, pre-K to 2nd grade. And I have the same course for grad students with 2 sections. So that's 4 sections of students. It was about 100 plus students in the fall of 2020, where I had to do something with these fieldwork hours. As you know, the university coursework was fully remote in the fall of 2020, and that was still new to us then. My students were unable to observe or enter a DOE classroom. There was no, let's have a university student pop in online. None of that was happening. And I feel very strongly that I think videos have a wonderful place in teacher education, and there are outstanding videos to be used. I just don't think that they can replace the actual teaching experience, particularly the experience of lifting a child up and into reading. There is nothing like it. That was my micro, the micro level of what I was dealing with. At a macro level, what has been going on for quite some time is that there's a lack of experiences and training. When that happens, we have less effective teacher candidates. And so the buzz on higher ed, particularly in science of reading, is like, how much training are these pre-service teachers getting? Are they ready to hit the ground running when they enter their first classroom? I didn't want to perpetuate any situations where I would create an even less effective teacher pool. As I just mentioned, this is a big part of the science of reading conversation. At Brooklyn College, my students get 1 what you would consider reading science course, just 1, my course. And so I have to take every minute counts in that course. I need to leverage it to the max. And so fieldwork is so important for this reading science course. If I do it right, I know that I could get a 2 for 1 out of my course. Also at a macro level, my CUNY students are not traditional students who go off to college and oftentimes families are paying or they're staying in dorms. My CUNY students are in need of valuable, compensated, degree-aligned jobs. They are often paying for university on their own. They're often saving up and then spending all of that money on a semester's worth of courses. And we really need to support them so that they are not left out in what my last point is here, this uneven playing field for paid internships. So my students often are not able to go for these internships because they need to be making more money or whatnot, or they need a more flexible work schedule because they have childcare or parent care or elder care responsibilities of some kind. So this really, really weighed on me during the pandemic, both the micro and the macro elements of what was going on. So at the same time, I started rethinking the training model. Typically in higher ed, when it comes to pre-service teacher training, and for anyone on the call who doesn't know, pre-service teachers are students who are enrolled in a school of education that are going for that major so that they can become a certified teacher. In the typical model, we start by asking our pre-service teachers to do some whole class work. They're writing lesson plans for the whole class. They're going in and observing the whole class. They're taking low inference notes on whole classes. They might step in and do a read aloud for whole classes. From there, I'm sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. From there, we then say, oh, now you can become more specialized. So then you can go and you can get a specialized degree as a reading specialist, and then you can work with small groups of students and do more intimate work. And then you could even be even more highly specialized to do that level of one-on-one that some of our students need. I was training my students in that way in the courses. They were mostly focused on whole class work. And then at some points they were doing small group activities. In the pandemic, I thought to myself, why are we going this way, making sure that these students who have very little knowledge of the field of education and are just building their experience bank, why are we burdening them with trying to deal with the incredible variability, again, of a whole class when they could fine-tune their skills if they just worked one-on-one? So my new way of thinking about training pre-service teachers is actually to flip the paradigm here and to say, you know what, my students are going to start by being trained in how to work really well and in a highly skilled way, one-on-one with a student who's a striving reader. From there, after they've done this tutoring for some time, they can then be promoted into a small group instructor, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. And that requires more savvy. You're dealing with more behaviors. You're dealing with more differences. You have to differentiate more. From there, I think students are prepared to then go into a whole class when they get their first teaching job and really consider in a deep and meaningful way what it's like, what those striving readers really need, because they had experiences working with those students. My students will not be the teachers who think about taking what works for most children and then just giving it again for the striving readers. No, I'm pretty confident my students who have done this one-on-one tutoring are going to think about what works for striving readers, what works for all readers, but they're always going to have a special place for those striving readers to think about what they need in a more strategic way than I've been able to train them in the past. Okay, so in the fall of 2020, I went back into the university thinking about what I could do. I also felt, as I had mentioned, I had the privilege of teaching my child how to lift off into word reading. And I felt like this was the one thing that I could contribute in the midst of the pandemic when everyone was contributing so much. And so I said, okay, well, what if we could improve foundational literacy skills for first and second grade striving readers from historically underserved communities, and there's some of our kiddos in our programs, while we also improve the clinical experiences for pre-service teachers. So there's my one section of my grad course students again. And on the left, you'll see the CUNY tutors with some of the children. And you see the love there, the big smiles and the hugs, which is awesome. So that was my twofold mission. And that is my mission to this day with CUNY Reading Corps. So when I started this again, it's like, okay, so how does Brooklyn College, how does CUNY get this off the ground? I mean, when you really think back about the fall of 2020, this is pre-vaccine. This is total and complete lockdown. This is office buildings are shuttered. How do you get something like this off the ground? And I always like to make this little joke here. Andrew Fletcher, my partner at DOE Central, we just did it the old-fashioned way. We had endless phone calls. We called everyone we knew. We leveraged every network we had. We called through the CUNY chains. We got yeses, and when we got a no, we just hung up the phone and we called someone else. And I did that on the CUNY side, and he did that on the DOE side. It just took two really committed people to say, no, this is what's best, and we're going to find a way forward for this. That's how we got it done in the fall of 2020 through the school year till the end of 2021 there. At the start of the second school year, so that was the first year we did it, then we came back and we said, okay, we're going to do this again. The University Dean for Education at CUNY, remember there's 15 schools of ed across CUNY. She's been so generous, University Dean Ashley Thompson. She heard about what we were doing the first year from 2020 to 2021, and she offered her services, her help, the capacity of her office. And so she was also able to leverage New York City mayoral office money, and we were able to expand the program outside of Brooklyn College into a CUNY-wide initiative during the 2021-2022 school year. So that was just last year. And one of the best things we were able to do when we were connected with University Dean Thompson's office was we were able to do a CUNY-wide call to action. So in a single recruitment outreach, we emailed approximately 15,000 CUNY education students, and 1,200 people emailed us back saying that they wanted a paid tutoring job. That was incredible. Again, this was at a moment when I feel that the CUNY students came and they felt the mission that we were trying to deliver on. They came to us and they said, we want to help too. It was an all hands on deck moment. You should know that at the time, I only had grant money when we were doing this recruitment. I only had grant money for 65 slots. And yet we had 1,200 applicants for the position. And so then more grant money came in. And again, we were able to expand and expand. It's been just incredible. Our CUNY students overwhelmingly come from the New York City public school system. And so when they hear about us going back to these schools, serving, these might be their own children, their nieces and nephews, their neighbors, the school that they went to, the neighborhood that they grew up in, they feel a sense of urgency to get back in those schools and to help out. And that's why so many of them are becoming educators. So that's kind of the backstory of how we got to where we are. So where are we today? So we're in our third year here. So again, we have this map with the overlaying situations in the communities where the purple is our lowest performing schools. We have the blue with our low income communities. We have our areas hardest hit by COVID. And I just want to give a shout out to CUNY. CUNY has really showed up for this initiative. We have 17 CUNY campuses from which we are now pulling pre-service teachers. And I know we said we had 15 schools of ed. We had a few students come to us from other campuses that were then going to become education majors. So it's just incredible. And then there's my gray pins of the participating DOE Department of Education schools. So this year we have 70 agreements with schools across New York City to help support their schools. Now, I want to acknowledge these schools. These schools have been through it all. The staff at these schools are absolutely remarkable. We are only going in to support them and to give them every last bit of energy we have, but they are doing all of the heavy lifting all day long with these students. I just want to acknowledge that we come in to lend a helping hand. They're the ones who have been there through everything with these students. They feel so committed to getting these student services. Also, many of these school leaders and teachers, they were CUNY students themselves. And so there's just a really good CUNY DOE vibe going on around this initiative. These administrators and teachers are doing whatever they can to get their student services, and they trust CUNY. I know many of them, and so we're just all in it together to serve these students. So what exactly do we do with the tutoring? Well, at CUNY, I started this in my courses, and so that is called the embedded course model. You see that in the first box there. Underneath that, you see the hired part-time students. I had no idea that the embedded course model would lead to hiring part-time tutors. That was not my intention when I started this. It was my twofold mission. Could I put this in improve clinical practices for my students? Could we serve the DOE students? When we saw that that was working, more grant monies and more requests started coming in from schools. And so we said, oh, wow, we better hire some pre-service teachers. So as I mentioned, all our emphasis is that the university students are education majors. They can be undergrad or graduate students. We have incredible tutors that come to us from our community colleges all the way up to our advanced graduate coursework. This is obvious, but I just want to clarify. In the embedded course model, tutoring is a requirement to pass the course. That's how I bake this into, that's how I design this with my courses. If the student is a part-time hired tutor from another campus or whatnot, it is not a requirement for any of the courses that they're taking. There is a paid component to this. So the first grant that I wrote for this in the fall of 2020, I wrote it so that if I said to the grantor, if I train my students and pair them and get them going with tutoring, once they hit their fieldwork hours, could I have a grant that then pays my students $20 to keep my students going with tutoring? And that was the first grant I got, and the grants have continued in this way. So for the embedded course model students, they fulfill their fieldwork, and then there's grant money so that they can provide another 10, 20, however many sessions their student needs. The hired students from other CUNY campuses, they're paid for the whole time that they're doing this work. The time commitment is that for the embedded course model, my courses have 30 hours of field work. Please don't be discouraged if you have a course, if you're a professor and you have 10 or 15 or 20 hours. I've worked with universities and professors across the country where they have a bundle of fieldwork hours and they're going to do something around tutoring. They're going to train their students in a program and then maybe send them off to a school or whatnot. So you can think about this in a multitude of ways. It doesn't have to be the same framework. The hired part-time students, they are committed to tutor 2 to 3 students for 40 sessions. Okay. The program, so I started this before I had the program I wrote, Reading Ready, up and going. I've been the academic advisor for Reading Rescue, and so I use that program with my embedded course model. Other universities are using Reading Ready, and I can talk to you more about why you would use one or the other. Both are fantastic. The hired part-time tutors are using one or the other. The best is when you have a tutor who stays with the initiative for some time, and then they have an opportunity to be trained in both programs. The embedded course model students have to serve at least one student. The goal is that they would provide 20 to 40 sessions for that student, depending on their fieldwork. And the hired part-time students are serving 2 or 3 students. So here's the 2 programs. Again, you can use, I want to emphasize this, you can use any program that you have access to. You could design a tutoring program, do what works best for you. You could also use these programs, whatever you want. So again, my affiliation here is that I wrote Reading Ready, it was how I was teaching my child how to read, and Reading Rescue has been a program that's been around. It was developed by Dr. Nora Lee Hoover and actually Dr. Holly Lane at the University of Florida. It was brought to New York, and it's been used around New York City with a lot of philanthropic funds. So Reading Ready and Reading Rescue, the dosage is always high dosage. So we do this tutoring 3 to 5 days a week. Our university students commit to that, which is so awesome. What we know about tutoring is if it's 1 or 2 days a week, it's not going to be nearly as effective. Reading Ready, I wrote as preventative work for kindergartners. So it's something I hope all kindergartners get some form of instruction on. But you can use it for first graders or second graders as an intervention. We are going to be using it with some kindergartners in the second half of the year in CUNY Reading Corps now. Reading Rescue has always been for first and second grade striving readers. The format for Reading Ready, it's designed to be one-on-one. You can use it in a 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 model. It's a 20-minute lesson. Reading Rescue, we use it 1 to 1, and we're now piloting the small group version of Reading Rescue, which I ran a randomized control trial on pre-pandemic. And then obviously the pandemic hit and we had to let go of that for a little bit. Reading Rescue is a 30-minute intervention. Both are research-based. Reading Ready doesn't yet have its evidence-based, although I'm monitoring the evidence as it's coming into CUNY almost daily. Reading Rescue does have quite a strong evidence base. It has 4 empirical or 4 academic articles written on it. 3 of them are RCTs, randomized controlled trials, which is great. I became affiliated because my mentor had conducted an RCT on Reading Rescue years ago. Fee for schools, we do this all for free. We have grant money. So it's quite a lot of grant work that we do. And I'll thank my funders at the end for all of their generosity. We train our university students using high quality asynchronous PDs. So that's part of what we've designed over the years. CUNY didn't design it. Actually, I designed the Reading Ready and the Reading Rescue one, work with the Benedict Silverman Foundation, which owns Reading Rescue. The asynchronous PD for Reading Ready is about 4 to 5 hours. And there's all these different checks for understanding. There's paper, little reflections that you submit, questions that you answer, and that's the same for Reading Rescue. Reading Rescue, though, is about a 10 to 12 hour PD. It's a more robust program. So Reading Ready came out of COVID. That's how I started it. Reading Rescue, as I mentioned, has a long history of being in the New York City Department of Education. It's actually been used for about 20 years in New York City. And I'm going to move on here. So again, the programs, for those of you who are looking for a program, you might consider this. You could consider this as the programs I'm affiliated with, or consider this as the programs you're going to adopt for your tutoring program. Reading Ready, we need this on-ramp, and that's why I wrote Reading Ready. We need an on-ramp of just really good and delicious word analysis, blending. How do we get students even to read those initial sentences so that they're not guessing and starting with bad word reading habits? That's where Reading Ready comes in. So there's quite a bit of phonemic awareness work in Reading Ready. There is letter sound practice. There's substantial phonics work and word analysis work with word chains and word mapping. And then the students are reading decodable text. They're reading these decodable sentences, and we have some free decodable text that match to our scope and sequence. You can see Reading Rescue is going to do all of that, but the students are reading authentic text. They're doing lots of fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension work, in addition to very good explicit systematic phonics work. I'm going to skip this slide for now. If anyone has program questions, we can come back to it. So how do you get a tutoring program off the ground when you have to get these students into schools? Well, it does take a little school coordination, but it's not unreasonable. So we at CUNY, when I started this, and I was working with Andrew Fletcher at the DOE, we prioritize schools with low English language arts scores on their third grade test. We also prioritize the schools with high economic needs indexes. That's what we use in New York City. So low ELA, high ENI. We all know that those often can be highly correlated, but they don't always, that doesn't always happen. So those are the schools who we reached out to first. And then we would go in tiers. We'd reach out to this group of schools, and then the next group, and the next group. The schools would identify, they would say, yes, we want this tutoring. So then they identify a school coordinator. It could be the literacy coach. It could be a parent coordinator. It could be the assistant principal. It could be a teacher. It could be the librarian, who's ever there willing to lend a hand. That coordinator will roster striving, and now we're working with kindergartners in the second half of the year, K to second grade readers. And I'll talk a little bit about the scores we use. So there's whatever available assessment data they have, we will take. So that assessment data, as you all know, schools are using levels, and a lot of schools are using levels. And so we take it. I'm not there to scold schools or anything like that. I take what they have and I use it. So they'll give us that. They'll give us a cadence or Dibbles data. They might give us Amira data, or we'll run our own Amira assessments. We'll take whatever data they're giving us. And then we ask, okay, so what are the ideal times for your student at the school to be tutored? Is it the morning, afternoon, after school? All we ask is that there's a consistent time. And then that coordinator, after the students are rostered in the spreadsheets, that coordinator is in charge of managing the schedule. So they might have 10 students being tutored at the school. They might have 40. And that coordinator is in charge of making sure if it's remote tutoring, the student is logged in. If it's in person, the tutor is there and the student is ready to sit down. So what does a professor need to do? So if you're like me, maybe you're now thinking, oh, I could do this in one of my courses. My advice as a professor is that I would inform your students ahead of the semester that this is going to be the fieldwork requirement for the course, or maybe this is going to be your major project for the course. I do think it's important to give the students a heads up on that. I have a survey, a little Google form that the students walk through and they check, yes, I understand. Yes, I understand. Yes, I understand. That we call it the survey of understanding. And now at CUNY, after a couple of semesters of doing this, we've just made it part of their registration. It's in the fine print when they register for the courses that this is what they're going to do for their fieldwork. So you'll get there soon. Then as the professor, you're going to map out how many weeks do you have in the semester? What weeks can you use for training? Now, if you're using a program that needs to have synchronous training or in-person training, you'll work with that program's coordinator about when they will come to your class and how they'll do it. If you use a program that has asynchronous work, you might do what I say, which is I say to my students, you have the first 2 weeks, or you have the first 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the program they're doing, to do the asynchronous training. I'm going to leave you alone with assignments until that's done. But when that due date says you need to be done with the tutoring, we're checking in on you to make sure you have it done. We're looking under the hood at all the completion. You're going to meet with us to make sure you have the skills. They submit a little video, 5-minute video of them practicing, and then we pair you and you're off. So finally, you're going to have the training materials and the program materials ready. So that's obvious, but whatever program you're going to use, just make sure that the printer, it knows when you need the materials by, and you've mapped all of that out of when you could get those program materials. So the next two pieces are critical. How do we pair our university students with DOE students? Well, the tutor, when they sign up for this, or they acknowledge that this is going to be their fieldwork requirement, they provide availability 3 to 5 days a week at the same hour. And the embedded course model students, they can do anywhere from 3, 4, or 5 days a week. Some of our students want to finish the tutoring faster because they have other obligations, or they want to finish it quite quickly and they'll do 5 days a week because they want to get to the paid portion of the tutoring, which is always fun to see. Other students will say, I've got 3 days a week and that's how I'm going to do it. And we say, no problem, so long as it's 3 days a week. Our tutors give the availability, the school coordinator gives the students availability, and we just do this where we cross-reference it. We're not using any fancy software yet. We hope in the future we will be. It'll give us a lot of time back on our staff. We pair based on availability. We provide a Zoom link, or the tutor travels to the school. I'll talk about that in just a second. It's not just enough, as you know, to pair a university student and train them and send them off to tutor. There has to be a level of oversight. We do, and I've done this since the start of this tutoring initiative, a first observation is provided using a fidelity checklist. So we have a checklist for each one of these programs, and we provide that observation between the first and the fifth session. So we catch the tutors right at the beginning, and you can tell right away who needs extra support. So our team, we now have a CUNY team that will flag anyone in need of support. And someone on the team meets with that tutor and they model via Zoom. They might hop into the next session and help the tutor out and do the modeling in real time with the student. And that tutor will get a second observation. All tutors then get a final observation. So the next observation that's provided to all tutors is between the 15th and the 20th session. So to summarize, all tutors receive at least 2 observations. One of the observations is between the first and fifth session. The second observation is somewhere between the 15th and 20th session. A few tutors will need that middle assessment, that optional assessment in the middle. Now, if a tutor stays on with us, that's awesome. And we're going to give them more observations going forward. But this is the crux of how we do it in the embedded course model. So key roles. Now, remember, CUNY has grown quite large in a short amount of time. So we now have lead instructors. So here's a Zoom link, a Zoom picture of all of our lead instructors. Many of these individuals are former grad students, or they were in my undergrad courses. We're able to pay these individuals $25 an hour. They reflect the diversity of our CUNY tutors. They reflect the diversity of our students. All of our CUNY tutors do, and it's just so awesome. And we also have program managers. The 2 of the individuals you see on the screen, Max and Paula, were grad students of mine who tutored. They then became lead instructors. They are just so awesome. We then promoted them into a program manager role, and they're full-time CUNY employees now, which just warms my heart. And we hope to do this with more and more of our exceptional CUNY tutors. So that's a great way for a university to think about, like, growing your own tutoring program and promoting those excellent tutors up over the course of several semesters. Okay. So now I've mentioned a little bit about remote and in-person. And I know this table looks a little scary, but I just want to mention that we do this work both remotely and in person, direct to home, in the school building. So obviously in the fall of 2020, I had no option. I did this remotely, direct to home, because the children were in their homes. They weren't at schools. We connected with the families via the school, but this was happening during the school day because honestly, there wasn't that much school going on in the fall of 2020. In the spring, we continued in that way, but some of the schools started opening up. And so the children would be in the schools during the school day, and a tutor would Zoom in during the school day to support them. Fast forward, I'll just bring you over here. Now we are doing all kinds of support. So we do this remotely. If the school wants us to do this in after school, we do it that way. We do it remotely during the school day. We do, you could be also remotely direct to home. And that has worked out beautifully too. We now have in-person sites. We have 7 schools that are doing this in person. And the in-person is happening where our tutors go during the school day, or they're going to after school. We are trying to meet the needs of schools in whatever way they need us. They are the ones that are there all day for these kiddos. And so we're trying to be as amenable as possible to their needs. Okay, so I just wanted to give you an example of remote instruction. This kind of grounds us. This is PS 56 in Brooklyn. And you see Jessica in the upper left there with her student, and you see the other students who are doing this remote tutoring. You see the little girl standing up. She was so proud of her work. She's standing to show her tutor. And you see in this the middle picture there, I am able to go into a lot of schools and see these lab setups where the children have headphones on and the school is able to bring in 5 to 10 students at a time in a classroom or a designated space for this tutoring to occur. And it's just remarkable. If you're ever a little leery about remote instruction, you could talk to me. I have seen nothing but incredibly beautiful relationships being built between the tutors and the students. One little anecdote for Jessica over here and her student. I was there taking this picture. I was waving to Jessica, who's one of my students, and her student turned around and said, "Oh, do you know my tutor?" And I said, "Oh, yes, she's one of my students." And he said, "What is she a student of?" I said, "Oh, she's learning how to become a teacher." And he was so quick to say, "She doesn't need to learn how to become a teacher. She is already the best teacher." Oh, it just warmed my heart. And I have story after story about the incredibly fun and warm relationships that have been developed in this remote tutoring environment, and also effective. I'll show you the results in a second. We also love our in-person. Our in-person is awesome. We were able to do a lot of in-person instruction over the summer. So here's we run summer programs now. So here's our summer tutoring sites. And you see our tutors wearing their CUNY Reading Corps t-shirts, our very cool Brooklyn Nets type black and white t-shirts. And they had such a great time. And again, you see this lab environment with our students and our tutors. So let me just simplify this. I don't want, again, anyone to think like, "Oh my gosh, you want me to run a summer program? Is that what you're talking to me about?" No. You should just, if you're a professor, maybe you could just pilot this in your university class. I have to tell you, I'm tenured now at CUNY, and for the rest of my tenure at the university, my students will be tutoring. It has been the most enriching experience for them and for me to see who really knows how to do what I'm talking about in class, who can execute on it. They have grown, these university students have grown leaps and bounds in their confidence and in their skills in how to actually teach a child how to read. So if you want to think about your university course, use your fieldwork hours or replace a major assignment. I did have to throw out some assignments and it was fine. I should have let them go. They're going to write plenty of papers. You can use a free program. So both of the programs that we use are the Reading Ready. I can send to you for free if you're a university professor and you'd like to use it. I could send you the PD and the binder. I would be happy to do that. And Reading Rescue is a program that you could work with the Benedict Silverman Foundation if you're a university who is interested in using it. You could have your students track their tutoring progress. You don't have to do the sophisticated data trackers and all this stuff that we use. Just have your students track how many sessions you could come, and I could share a data tracker with you if you're interested. Again, I want to make sure you know you can use, obviously, any program you want. So if you have a program that you already use in your own practice as an interventionist, maybe that's a program you're going to bring into your university sphere. Your students will be better off for it. So you could do observations the way you normally would. You know, you're probably going in and out of schools, or you're watching your videos. You could do this the same way. Your university students could submit videos if possible. Sometimes if the student can't be recorded on a video, you could just do an audio recording of the tutoring session, which would be fine. And eventually you could get grant money the way we've done at CUNY to hire a coordinator or a lead instructor who's a former tutor to help you with the coordination of all of this or the training of all of this. So I'll end with talking about these outcomes. So our outcomes have been wonderful. So again, we're in our third year of doing this. So you see the projected to the right. So in the first year, total chaos in New York City. Please remember, total chaos. We had 182 students that year who were doing this as part of their field work. It was incredible. We had 93 CUNY tutors who we hired for a total of 275 tutors in the dark days of COVID, as I say. We also need to give a shout out. We had DOE teachers who came to us who wanted to join this initiative. And still just really almost chokes me up when these teachers said, oh, let us help. 195 DOE teachers came to us. That was a total of 470 individuals who we trained in these evidence-based programs, and we served 592 students that year. Remember, we have that twofold mission. We want to train pre-service teachers, we want to help young children. So our impact was over 1,000 individuals were supported by this work. You can see that we grew the following year. Last year, to my great surprise, we had 650 CUNY tutors. Almost 170 of those individuals were a part of fieldwork in my courses. And then we had incredible turnout to hire tutors. 482 CUNY tutors were hired. So we grew by a ridiculous margin. Like we had 36% growth in what we did the first year to the second year, which is just wonderful. So again, we trained 650 tutors. We served over 1,200 students. Please remember, these are children who come from families who would not otherwise be able to afford a private tutor. We are always prioritizing the schools, the communities, the families who's would not otherwise be able to have that tutoring. And our twofold mission there is just over 1,800. We're going big this year, and we're doing our best to hit these targets. We are going to try to train 800 CUNY pre-service teachers. So 150 will come from coursework, and actually that number is going to go up quite a bit. We're going to be around 200. Enrollment, as you know, if you're at a university, enrollment has gone down over the course of the pandemic at many universities across the country. And so you see that in my fieldwork, but we're bolstering this fieldwork number, and I will adjust this soon, because other professors now at CUNY have signed on and they want to do this in the spring, which is so awesome. So now we have about 5 other professors who are going to bring this to colleges around New York City. I'm just so thrilled about that. And if we do this, we will be able to serve about 2,700. If we have 800 CUNY tutors, we're going to have some DOE staff that's going to come and help us. Again, 180 DOE staff. We hope to serve over 2,700 students. And there's our twofold mission, which would just be so awesome. Okay, there we go. We're growing. And there's our twofold mission, which would be incredible. So I won't spend a lot of time on another table here, but I just want to let you know that we scrupulously monitor the outcomes here. And we're looking at over the course of the year. So we do a school year program. That's how we started this. Then we now run a summer program. So you see school year 2020, 2021, then a summer program, then another school year. Then last summer, we ran another program. We monitor the number of sessions we're able to provide for free. We monitor the average number of sessions. Obviously, summer programs are really short. We do look at intervention reading level, not the way you're thinking about just regular old reading levels. This is intervention type work. We look to see, and we want to make sure that our interventions are aligning with the growth over the average number of sessions. We typically see about 1 intervention reading level growth over 10 sessions. And that is reflected also, that kind of growth is reflected in, we give an artificial intelligence foundational skill assessment called AMIRA. And we look at their area score to see about how much growth has this child made. And we're seeing about a half year's worth of growth during the school year programs and about a month and a half worth of growth during the summer programs. Remember, summer's all about that summer slide. So any type of growth over the summer is fantastic. You'll see our first graders typically make more growth than our second graders. Both are making great gains. First graders, though, you see huge jumps because there's just so much quick work. When you get these students at the right point in time, they're up and at them if they get the right type of intervention. Okay, again, Reading Ready, we monitor number of sessions. For Reading Ready, we're looking at phoneme segmentation and non-word reading, and we monitor how well those foundational skills that are so predictive of later literacy outcomes are. So I want to make sure we're ending where you also like feel this in your heart about why this is so important. It's not just about the numbers, the students are making growth. It's about the tutors and these pre-service teachers and what they're getting out of it. So we 130 tutors participated in a survey over the summer. This is just the sample of data that I'm pulling from. 99% of these pre-service teachers said that they had an increased awareness and appreciation for research-based reading instruction. This is something that we are trying so hard to get across at our universities if we're any type of science of reading professor. 97% of these tutors said that they now have confidence in teaching foundational literacy skills. 97% said that they would recommend these programs. They would recommend whatever wonderful program you're going to bring to them too. 94% said that they foresee using the strategies or activities in the future when they teach emergent readers. And these tutor testimonials, I'm not going to read these to you. I just want to read this little part where one of the tutors said, "This experience made me realize why I chose to study and major in education. This was the best summer job. I connected a lot with my students. We shared laughs and we completed the work." Isn't that beautiful? Another tutor, "The number of skills that I've learned from this experience is invaluable. Thank you for the experience." This tutor said, "I formed a bond with the students." And finally, "This made me really proud and happy for her to see her abilities are limitless." Obviously, a tutor talking about a child that they're tutoring. It's just so beautiful. So success despite the odds. This was all a pandemic initiative. So we did this and started this when school buildings were closed. There was limited technology. I'll never forget talking to a mom who had one iPhone for 3 children. The schools had sent her off. They closed the schools, no iPads, no computers in the home. And we were tutoring the child at first on an iPhone, and that iPhone was being shared with 2 other children in the household. But we persevered. We got the family a laptop through the DOE. The DOE was wonderful. Whenever we said there's a family in need, they came to the call. It was wonderful. We experienced major teacher and staff shortages during this. It was very complicated to continue this when the school coordinators were out. The vaccine mandate in fall of 21 for DOE destabilized our whole initiative. At one point, the previous chancellor would only allow us to do this in after school, which after school during the pandemic was quite chaotic. Also, we were training these pre-service teachers as best we could. They had little experience with evidence-informed programs. But despite those odds, and this does not include our tutoring sessions that we've done so far this school year, over the last 2 years, we provided over 31,000 free tutoring sessions to first and second graders in need of support. I'm honored to tell you, we are upwards of 40,000 free tutoring sessions now for these kids and these families. And it just is so wonderful. So a reminder, if I could do this in New York, you can do this anywhere. Find that literacy faculty member, the one with that spark of passion, who's going to do whatever it takes. That university professor will likely rethink their field work. They might open a new course. What I just did at CUNY is I opened a new course, and I want to give a shout out to AIM again, because they have helped me with this new course. I'm running around doing all this tutoring support, and they're supporting me in my coursework. So you could also think about recruiting pre-service teachers in other ways through the hired model. Leverage your partnerships. Talk to your schools that you're working with. Maybe they have a tutoring program that they would like you to do, and you could train your university students in that program. I'm encouraging schools that maybe they should start requiring this of their higher ed partners. I know that's bold, but I think maybe the schools should be asking more of us and requiring some reading science aligned tutoring. Talk to your community-based organizations. They have a treasure trove of staff that you can tap into. And finally, make sure you're using a research-based program and consider your synchronous or asynchronous training and support. What is best for your students at the university? with regards to training. Think about those field observations too, and how you can get those done. Make sure you have a fidelity checklist. That's critical in all of this. I want to thank the foundations and the grants that I've received to do this work, and the money that CUNY Central has brought in to support this work. My first grant was from the Heckscher Foundation for Young Children in conjunction with the Benedict Silverman Foundation. All of these other funders have come with such a generous spirit to this work, and CUNY Central has been awesome in leveraging CUNY Career Launch and NYC Men Teach initiatives and the Summer Youth Employment Program. And I think I'm right on time to say thank you so much. I hope that you can find your way to rethinking how you might engage in fieldwork with higher ed institutions. Pam, back to you.
That was inspiring, Katie. And your enthusiasm is just, it spills over, and your dedication to kids. Thank you so much. There were just a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course, I'm sorry, yes.
So one question is, how are striving readers defined? Like, when you say striving reader, how do you define that?
So first, the school, we talk with the school about how they're defining striving readers, but then we have a student selection guideline document that we use with our programs, our two programs. I've worked with these over the years to refine how we would guide a school to select that student based on Acadians measures. So in New York, they're using Acadians, formerly known as DIBELS, and we've spliced the data to say, you know what, you should look for students who are performing in this sort of way on that Acadians. I just want to know, schools are always talking to us about reading levels, and I'm not here to, say yes, no, whatever. They give us that data as well, but then we'll say to them, okay, yes, we'll consider this, and also please give us that Acadians data so that we can make an informed decision. Now, schools may say, I know the students' Acadians data looks okay, but something's going on here. And we will communicate, we'll work with the school to support the students that they think are best. And other times we'll say, this student really doesn't qualify for the program, so.
Good. Oh, thanks, Katie. There was a question, it's $20 an hour, correct? Someone said, was it $20 total or $20 an hour? I said, I think it's $20 an hour, yes?
$20 an hour, yes. So our CUNY students are making a bit of money here, which is great. So my embedded course, the students in my course, they do the training and then they tutor for 20 hours. They have 30 hours of total, 10 hours is training, 20 hours, they fulfill that. And then in the last month of the semester, they can make $400 if they tutor for an extra 20 sessions. And then we even say to them, why don't you pick up another student? We're always like a little bit of a sales, like, why don't you pick up another student? When they tutor one child for 40 sessions, they make $800.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and we've had CUNY students who have taken this on like a very serious part-time job, where they're tutoring 2 students are making $1,600. They're tutoring 3 or 4 students, and the money starts
adding up.
Yeah, it's really great.
How can the trainings for the programs be accessed? Someone had said, it looks like there's some passcodes on it, but I think I heard you say that if folks emailed you, is that the answer there?
Yeah. So I own Reading Ready, and I would be happy to give any higher ed institution who wants to use the Reading Ready manual or the PD. I'm happy to make you a little class, and then I could send it to you. Reading Rescue is slightly different. It's owned by the Benedict Silverman Foundation. I work really closely with them, but anyone could email me and I could connect you with the Benedict Silverman Foundation. Or you could email the Benedict Silverman Foundation, or actually just email me and I'll get you connected with them. And then they can talk to you about ways that you might be able to engage with Reading Rescue, if that's of interest to you.
Thank you, Katie. We see your email right there on the screen. And then you talked about how the children are identified and how the tutors are identified. How does it fit into existing reading programs? That was a question. And that's the last one then.
Oh, that's a
good question.
That's a good question. Whoever asked that. Oh
yes,
my goodness.
It is.
Well, it depends on your reading program, right? Doesn't it? It really depends. That's a loaded question that I get quite often. If you have a program that is doing word work and letter knowledge and phonemic awareness and whatnot, this is an excellent complement to that. It's going to give that type of, let's do it more, let's have it more rigorous, let's have it more systematic than what they might be getting in the whole class program. I'm also in and out of schools where they don't have systematic and explicit phonics support. And so I would never double dip a child in the same program that doesn't have like a reading science aligned approach. It's not a good use of a striving reader's time. So I will often say that this is essential for those students who aren't getting this kind of support. This is like the only really explicit systematic work that they're getting. And so it's critical, and it's nothing like the program that they have in their classroom.
Thank you for answering that question. It really was an important one. And thank you for such a wonderful evening of learning. And also thank you so much for allowing this to be recorded so others can gain this knowledge that may not have been able to attend tonight. And seeing lots of thank yous in the chat for you. Sherry Hartman is going to share an upcoming patent PLC that we're proud of, that we want to share with folks on the call. And then we'll close it up for the night.
That's great. Pam, one of your staff members just dropped the link. Oh, and I think I might to the CUNY Reading Corps.
Chalkbeat, I put it in.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
I did put it in. Yes,
Okay,
that
I'll put
Chalkbeat
it
article. And
one last
then you just put it in as well.
That's great. Thank
And-
you for everyone. There's a Chalkbeat article that just came out, and I'm done. Thanks so much, Pam.
Oh, thank you, Katie. It was wonderful. Sherry, do you have a moment to share about our upcoming PLC?
Sure. I'm happy to share some information on that. Starting January 11th, we will be kicking off exploring and integrating diverse children's literature in our classroom. And what that, it's not one of a typical book study. It's a little unique. One Wednesday a month, we will be looking at different topics, and a 15-minute content will be shared from literacy team members as well as folks in the field. I will be partnering with a teacher from the Philadelphia School District, and we will present dialogic reading in February. But these sessions will give folks a little bit of content as well as an opportunity to really look at representation and how it matters to all children, and so that they see themselves in the books they read and gain perspective of others' experiences. And we just think it will be a unique learning community to utilize children's literature as that catalyst for promoting diversity. And so hopefully we'll see some of you join us.
Launch is January
to it.
11th.
Mhm.
And Dr. Lakeisha Johnson, who's partnered with us in the past, and we admire so much her work, will help us launch that series. So if you go to the patent training calendar, you'll just find that on January 11th. And
Yeah, and
Wednesday night, we have our book study for the writing group. So we're keeping busy at Patent. Anything else you wanted to add, Sherry?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to add that I did grab the link for I See Me and What We Read, which is Dr. Lakeisha Johnson's session, and she will be kicking us off on January 11th. And that session will be for a full hour. So we're excited to hear what she has to share.
All right, that's it, everybody. Take care. Be well, stay healthy. And again, thank you to Dr. Miles. An inspiring work that you're doing, making a difference for our pre-service teachers and students. It's really a wonderful thing that you're doing, Dr. Miles. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
Thank you
again.
for joining us. And
It was
thank you
an
to the patent team. Thank you, Katie.